TIFU by accidentally insulting my friend's culture and nearly ruining our friendship. So this happened a few days ago, and I'm still kind of mortified about it. I was hanging out with my best friend, Sam, who is originally from Korea. We've been friends for years, and we're close enough that I consider him more of a brother than a friend. Sam's always been super chill about things, and we've never really had any major issues, but recently, I may have crossed a line without even realizing it. Here's how it all went down. We were at a local coffee shop, just catching up and talking about life, work, and all the usual stuff. Sam had been talking about his upcoming trip to Seoul to visit his family, and I casually said, "Oh cool, you're going back to that crazy city? You know, all the big neon lights and endless shopping malls." I said it in a light-hearted, joking tone because, I don't know, I thought it sounded like something someone would say if they were talking about a major city. I didn't mean any harm by it. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I saw his face go pale, and the mood of the conversation shifted instantly. He went quiet and looked down at his coffee. For a second, I thought maybe I had said something awkward, like mentioning the fact he was going home in a way that sounded insensitive, so I tried to smooth things over. "Sorry, man. I didn't mean it like that," I said, trying to laugh it off. "You know I didn't mean to sound negative about Seoul or anything." He looked up at me, and there was this uncomfortable tension in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't anger or anything, but more like a mix of confusion and disappointment. It wasn't the Sam I knew. He stared at me for a second and then just quietly responded, "You don't really get it, do you?" I was taken aback, thinking maybe I had missed something important. "Get what?" "The way you just talked about Seoul," he said, his voice now quieter. It wasn't just a joke, it was dismissive of something that means a lot to me. I sat there, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. I thought I was being playful, but clearly, I had made a mistake. I had been so focused on sounding casual and funny that I didn't stop to think about how my words might be coming across to him. In the moment, I really couldn't understand what was wrong, but I knew I had to apologize. So, I did. "Man, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just trying to be funny." I had no idea it would come off like that. Sam sighed, but he didn't seem angry. He looked at me for a moment before explaining, "Seoul isn't just this flashy, neon place. It's my home. My culture. My family. You can't just reduce it to lights and shopping malls. There's so much more to it than that." And that's when it hit me. I had totally oversimplified a place that meant the world to him. I was so focused on making a joke that I didn't stop to think about how deeply his connection to Seoul and his heritage ran. He wasn't just talking about a city. He was talking about a place that shaped his identity, his upbringing, his entire sense of who he was. And here I was, reducing it to some cliché about neon signs. I felt awful. I had unintentionally dismissed something he clearly cared about deeply. It wasn't like I had outright insulted Seoul or Korea, but I had still managed to belittle it in a way that stung. I didn't even realize how harmful my casual comment had been until he pointed it out. Sam and I ended up talking for a long time after that, with him explaining how that kind of attitude toward his culture wasn't something he'd ever really been able to shake. Growing up in the States, he often had to deal with people making offhand comments like that, thinking it was just a funny joke or a way to summarize his background, but they didn't understand how it felt to be seen as a caricature of a place instead of a person. It was eye-opening for me. I was embarrassed and ashamed of myself for not thinking more critically about the way I was talking, especially to someone I cared about so much. We had a long, honest conversation about cultural sensitivity and how easy it is to take things for granted when you aren't personally affected by them. He told me that it wasn't the first time someone had reduced his home country to superficial stereotypes, and each time it stung a little more. I didn't realize how much this had affected him until he started sharing some of the stories from his childhood, when people would ask him things like, "Do you know Kung Fu?" or "Is your family like those crazy K-pop groups?" He'd laugh it off at the time, but it was clear that it had built up over the years. I felt like such an idiot. I had thought of myself as an open-minded person, someone who was always supportive and understanding of different cultures, but I had let my ignorance and laziness get in the way. I never really stopped to consider the weight of the words I used, and how someone from that culture might feel about them. It was a pretty emotional conversation, and we both ended up talking late into the evening. Sam didn't get angry with me, but I could tell that what I had said hurt him in a way that went deeper than I had anticipated. We ended up clearing the air, but I knew it would take some time for him to fully let it go. The worst part is that I wasn't trying to be racist or disrespectful, I was just being careless. But that's kind of the point, right? It's easy to let things slip, to make light of something you don't fully understand, and not realize the impact it has on someone else. I had to accept that just because I didn't mean to hurt him didn't mean that I hadn't. Since then, I've been making a real effort to be more mindful about the way I talk about other cultures, whether they're my own or not. I've also been reading up more on Korean culture, traditions, and history, so I can better understand Sam's background and be more respectful in the future. I feel lucky that Sam and I could have an open and honest conversation about it, and that he was willing to forgive me. But the whole experience was a real wake-up call. It showed me that even small, seemingly innocent comments can carry weight, and that it's so important to be aware of how our words and actions affect others, especially when it comes to cultural sensitivity. I'll definitely be thinking twice before making any more offhand comments about someone's culture, and I'll do my best to learn and listen before I speak. I don't ever want to be the person who unintentionally hurts someone I care about again. TLDR, I made a careless comment about Seoul to my Korean friend, reducing it to just neon lights in shopping malls, and ended up insulting his culture. It hurt him more than I realized, but we talked it out, and I learned a valuable lesson about cultural sensitivity and the weight of casual words. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by attempting to impress my girlfriend with my cooking skills and ending up nearly setting the apartment on fire. So, a little background, I've been dating my girlfriend, Sarah, for about a year now. She's smart, funny, and absolutely stunning. I, on the other hand, have always been a bit of a disaster in the kitchen. My idea of cooking usually involves a microwave or a delivery app. But lately, I've been thinking I need to step up my game, especially since Sarah is a pretty good cook herself. She's always talking about how much she loves trying new recipes and creating dishes from scratch, so I figured it was time for me to impress her by making a fancy dinner at home. I spent a week planning the perfect meal, convinced this was my moment to shine. I scoured Pinterest for easy but impressive meals, reading up on a ton of recipes that promised minimal effort but maximum wow factor. After a lot of deliberation, I decided on a lemon garlic butter shrimp pasta. How hard could it be, right? Shrimp, butter, garlic, lemon, what could go wrong? I bought all the ingredients, including the freshest shrimp I could find, and even got a nice bottle of wine to go with it. I was determined to make everything perfect. I even practiced my sophisticated kitchen talk, so when Sarah came over, I could drop a casual "oh yeah, I just julienned some fresh herbs" to make myself seem like a pro. The night of the big dinner came. Sarah texted me around 6 p.m. saying she'd be over by 7, so I had an hour to get everything ready. Easy. I put on some music, cracked open the wine, and got to work. The recipe seemed simple enough: heat up some butter, cook the shrimp, boil the pasta, and toss everything together. Piece of cake, right? Well, it started out well. I melted the butter in a pan, added the garlic, and let it simmer. The smell was amazing. I was feeling good, like I had this whole adulting thing down. But then came the shrimp. I tossed them into the hot butter, and immediately everything started to smell even better. I was feeling like a real chef now, flipping shrimp around like I was Gordon Ramsay. That's when I noticed something. My smoke detector was blinking. Huh. It was a little warm in the kitchen, but I didn't think it was that bad. I opened the window, turned on the fan, and kept cooking. The shrimp were coming out perfectly golden brown. I was almost finished. I added the lemon juice, tossed the shrimp with the pasta, and gave it a little taste. Holy crap, it was delicious. I was ready to serve. But as I was about to plate the food, I heard a small pop sound, and then the smoke detector started blaring at full volume. Uh-oh. I looked around in a panic. There was no visible fire, but the kitchen was getting smoky. Really smoky. My first instinct was to open all the windows, but it didn't help. The smoke wasn't going away. In fact, it was getting thicker. Okay, time to get serious. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the sink, but I couldn't even figure out how to pull the safety pin out. Meanwhile, the smoke was getting worse. I realized that I had neglected to turn on the stove vent. Who knew that a little garlic butter could create a literal cloud of smoke? I swear, it felt like I was living in a fog bank. I ran over to the stove, trying to clear the air with a dish towel, but that only made things worse. The towel caught on fire. Yes, a dish towel caught on fire. At this point, I was a full-blown mess. I grabbed it, trying to wave it out, but it just made the flames spread faster. Panic mode. I tossed the burning towel into the sink and turned on the faucet, but by then, the smoke was so thick I couldn't see anything. Then, just as things were spiraling out of control, I heard a knock on the door. Sarah was here. I opened the door, trying to look calm, but I was probably more red-faced than I've ever been in my life. Hey. Welcome to my, smoke-filled home, I said awkwardly. She looked past me into the kitchen and immediately raised an eyebrow. What's going on in here? She asked. Just, a little kitchen mishap, I said, attempting to downplay the chaos. I tried to act nonchalant, but at that point, it was clear that I had gone from charming boyfriend cooking a nice meal to a guy who almost burned his apartment down. Sarah stepped inside and looked around, taking in the smoke, the open windows, and the slightly charred towel still dripping in the sink. She glanced at me, and then at the pasta that was sitting on the counter, looking like it had just been through an emotional crisis of its own. Okay, so what happened here? She asked again, this time sounding less concerned and more amused. Well, I was trying to make shrimp pasta, but things got a little out of hand. I said, laughing nervously. It's still edible, though. I promise. She raised an eyebrow again. Really? I grabbed a plate and tried to serve her some of the shrimp pasta, but it was clear the whole thing was a mess. The shrimp were overcooked, the pasta was sticking together, and there was this odd burnt flavor to it. I wanted to die. We sat down at the table, and I watched her take a bite. For a moment, I held my breath, praying she wouldn't spit it out. But she didn't. She chewed thoughtfully for a second, then looked at me with a smile. You know, it's not that bad, she said, trying to spare my feelings. But I think we need a new plan for dinner. Maybe we can just get some pizza? Yeah, I agreed, probably for the best. She laughed and put her fork down. I love how you tried, though. I mean, it's definitely an experience. I've never had shrimp pasta with a side of smoke inhalation before. It's unique. I could tell she wasn't mad, just amused by the entire situation. Honestly, I was too. We ended up ordering pizza, laughing about my culinary disaster, and enjoying the night anyway. So, yeah, I definitely learned my lesson. Next time, I think I'll stick to ordering delivery. Or at least, I'll make sure I know how to turn on the stove vent before I try to cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. But hey, at least I didn't set the place on fire. Small victories, right? Moral of the story: if you're going to try and impress someone with cooking, Maybe start with something that doesn't involve open flames and garlic butter. Also, know how to use a fire extinguisher. Just in case. TIFU by joining a neighborhood Facebook group to be more involved. Let me preface this by saying I am not a Facebook person. I'm a 34-year-old guy who only uses Facebook to remember family birthdays and occasionally check if high school friends are bald yet. But 2 months ago, my girlfriend convinced me that I should get involved with the community more since I work from home and know maybe 4 people outside of DoorDash drivers. So I joined our local neighborhood Facebook group. Seemed innocent enough. People were posting about yard sales, lost cats, weird noises at night, always raccoons, and passive-aggressive complaints about trash bins. I lurked quietly for a few weeks until I saw a post from a woman named Karen, yes, really, asking for help setting up decorations for the spring fling block party. My girlfriend said, "You should help. It's a great way to meet people." I didn't have a good excuse not to, so I commented that I was available. She messaged me almost instantly with way too much enthusiasm. Apparently, they were short on volunteers, and I was a godsend. I was assigned decoration logistics, which sounded cooler than what it actually was, carrying stuff from Karen's garage to the park and helping her hang fairy lights. On the day of the event, I show up at 9 a.m. wearing cargo shorts, a t-shirt with a faded Batman logo, and Crocs, because I was told we'd be doing setup and hauling. Karen opens the door dressed like she's hosting the Met Gala in suburban Minnesota. Full makeup, a flowy floral dress, and wedges. I was immediately self-conscious. She hands me a Starbucks and says, "You're a lifesaver." I'm starting to feel like a decent human. We load up her SUV with plastic bins full of decorations, folding tables, bubble machines, chalk, and a box literally labeled Glitter Emergency Kit. Whatever, I go with it. At the park, we meet 3 other volunteers. One of them, Todd, is in a polo shirt tucked into jeans with a belt. Why is everyone so put together for this? I'm sweating through my Batman shirt and regretting the Crocs. Still, I power through. We spend the next 2 hours hanging bunting, organizing the prize table, setting up the cotton candy machine, which Karen has clearly never operated before and electrocutes herself lightly, and arranging the selfie wall, which features a rainbow of tissue paper flowers and a hand-painted sign that says "Bloom where you're planted." I suppress my gag reflex. Everything's going fine. At noon, the event starts, and people start trickling in. There's a bounce house, face painting, and a hot dog station manned by a guy named Steve who has 2 visible neck tattoos and wears gloves only half the time. Then Karen comes up to me and says, "We need someone to be the bee." I go, "What bee?" She points to a horrifying, oversized bee costume. Benny the Bumble. He's our spring fling mascot. I laugh, thinking she's joking. She's not. Apparently, every year someone wears the Benny costume and walks around taking pictures with kids and pretending to pollinate people. Todd was supposed to do it, but his sciatica flared up. I decline politely. Karen says, "It's tradition. Also, you said you'd help with decorations, and Benny is technically a decoration in motion." I don't know what kind of logic that is, but somehow I'm guilt-tripped into it. Fast forward 20 minutes and I'm inside a claustrophobic foam prison, sweating my entire soul out in a costume that smells like feet, regret, and Febreze. The only visibility I have is through 2 mesh eye holes that are not aligned with my actual eyes. My Crocs are the only part of me still breathing. I start walking around doing awkward finger guns and waving at toddlers who either love me or scream in terror. I'm trying to keep my balance because the costume's legs are about 4 inches longer than mine. Karen wants me to pollinate the crowd, so I awkwardly bop people with the giant foam flower attached to my hand. An older woman calls me inappropriate. Then disaster strikes. A group of teenagers decides it's funny to mess with Benny the Bumble. One of them dares another to de-pants the bee. I try to shuffle away, but the costume is heavy and cumbersome. Before I know it, one of them yanks on the back of the bee suit. Instead of pantsing me, the entire lower half of the costume comes loose, and because I was wearing very thin athletic shorts, no boxers, don't ask, I get moonlit in broad daylight in front of like 50 people, including a toddler who immediately starts crying. I panic, trip over my own foam leg, and faceplant into a tray of cupcakes. Pink frosting everywhere. I try to get up, but the head of the bee costume slips down over my face, and I just start spinning in circles like a dying Roomba. Karen runs over screaming Benny. Oh my god, like it's a real person who's been shot. Someone takes a picture. Of course they do. By the time I recover and reassemble Benny's decency, the event is basically chaos. The hot dog machine caught fire, probably Steve, the cotton candy machine is spewing sugar like a busted fire hydrant, and a swarm of actual bees has shown up, apparently attracted to all the sugary chaos and, according to someone, maybe confused by the bee costume. So now I'm running across the park, being chased by bees while children chant Benny's in trouble. I finally tear the head off the costume, throw it in a bush, and make a break for my car. I never even got my volunteer t-shirt. Later that night, the Facebook group is lit up. Half the neighborhood thinks I was a drunk teenager in a stolen costume. Karen posts a long message thanking our brave Benny without naming me, but attaches the picture of me face down in cupcakes with my actual butt visible. My girlfriend won't stop laughing. My mom sees the photo and texts me, "Is this performance art?" I left the group the next day. So yeah. That's how I tried to get involved with the community and ended up sexually harassing a park full of children as a bee. TIFU by volunteering to help my girlfriend's dad build a deck and accidentally sending him to the ER. So this happened last weekend and I still can't stop replaying the entire thing in my head, like a slow-motion train wreck made of wood-based nails, and shame. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I have been dating for a little over a year. Things have been great. She's smart, funny, gorgeous, and somehow finds my jokes charming rather than cringy. I've met her parents a few times. Her mom is sweet and instantly liked me, but her dad, Dave, is more of the strong, silent, intimidating type. Think Ron Swanson but with a permanent scowl and the arms of a man who's probably built more things than I've Googled how to fix. When Sarah mentioned that her dad was planning to rebuild their backyard deck and could use an extra set of hands, I saw an opportunity. I'm not the handiest guy around, but I can follow instructions and lift heavy things. Plus, brownie points with the intimidating father? Sign me up. We get to their house around 9 a.m. Saturday morning. Dave's already out back, shirt off, wearing cargo shorts and an aura of competence. He nods at me and says, "Grab some gloves." That's the most he said to me in the past 2 months. I felt honored. Things started off smoothly enough. I was hauling planks, holding beams steady, doing whatever grunt work was needed. Every time Dave handed me a tool and I didn't ask what it was, I felt like I leveled up. After lunch, Dave decided we'd start installing the new joists. He was working on positioning the frame while I was up on a ladder, hammering in some temporary bracing from the other side. And here's where I seriously, catastrophically, ed up. Dave told me to grab some carriage bolts from his tool chest in the garage. I jogged over, found a bag labeled 1/2 in carriage bolts, grabbed it, and brought it back. I was proud of myself. I even double-checked the label. What I didn't realize was that right next to that bag, there was another one with the exact same label, but those were the tempered ones we were supposed to be using. The ones I brought back were slightly cheaper ones he was saving for a different project. Dave, trusting me for whatever reason, used one of those bolts to secure a metal connector plate to the joist beam while I was still stabilizing the frame. I don't know if the bolt was defective or just not strong enough, but about 30 seconds later, while Dave was leaning in with his full weight, the bolt sheared clean off. He fell forward, lost his balance, and smacked his head hard on the edge of the unfinished deck. I heard the noise, a meaty thunk followed by a loud crash and a terrifying silence. I dropped everything and ran over. Dave was on the ground, bleeding from his forehead, dazed and not responding immediately. Sarah and her mom came rushing out when they heard me yelling. It was like a scene from a medical drama. Her mom's yelling at me to call 911, Sarah's kneeling next to her dad with blood on her hands, and I'm just standing there holding the stupid bag of bolts like it was cursed. Paramedics came quickly, thank God, and took Dave to the ER. He ended up with a mild concussion, 8 stitches, and a fractured wrist from trying to break his fall. I visited him at the hospital later that night, once I got the nerve. He just looked at me, sighed, and muttered, "Wrong bolts, huh?" I tried to apologize, but he just waved it off and said, "You followed instructions." I should have double-checked. That's on me too. Then he turned on the TV and didn't say anything else. Sarah swears he doesn't blame me, and her mom even laughed about it a little once it was clear Dave would be fine. But I've never felt so sick to my stomach. This wasn't just a screw-up, it was a literal bolt that sent someone flying. The worst part? When we got home, I noticed I had a splinter the size of a matchstick in my hand and almost passed out from pulling it out. So not only did I injure the man, I proved I'm physically and emotionally inferior to wood. The next morning, Dave texted me a picture of a bolt with the caption "half an inch of pure revenge." I have no idea if that means he forgives me or plans to get back at me the next time I pick up a hammer. Either way, I think I'll stick to IKEA furniture from now on. TIFU by not recognizing my own girlfriend at a party and hitting on her friend instead. This happened last weekend, and I'm still crawling through the wreckage. Let me set the stage. My girlfriend Emily and I have been dating for about 8 months. Things have been going really well. She's smart, hilarious, and not afraid to roast me when I deserve it. One of her friends, Lily, was throwing a big masquerade-themed birthday party. Think costumes, masks, dim lighting, the whole dramatic shebang. I'd never met Lily before, but Emily insisted I come. She told me she'd be getting ready with some of her friends and meeting me there later. So I roll up to this bougie house, dressed in a decent black suit and a simple gold-trimmed mask. I feel weird walking in solo, but the party's already packed. Low lighting, music thumping, champagne flowing, the works. I wander around for a while trying to find Emily, texting her a couple of times but no response. I assume she's still getting ready or got caught up. After about 45 minutes, I'm standing near the kitchen when a woman in a deep red dress and a black lace mask starts chatting with me. She's gorgeous, tall, with this confident vibe that immediately grabs attention. We start talking, mostly small talk at first: how do I know Lily, what do I do, etc. She tells me her name is Raven, clearly a party pseudonym. I go with Max, my middle name. She laughs and says mysterious names make everything sexier. At this point, I'm pretty sure she's flirting with me. She touches my arm while laughing, compliments my laugh, the usual signs. Here's where the stupid part of my brain kicks in. Instead of remembering I have a girlfriend, who is somewhere in this house, some misguided part of me thinks, *hey, it's just flirting. You're not doing anything serious. Yeah. Idiot. So Raven and I are getting a bit cozier by the minute. We share a drink. She leans in close when she talks. I start thinking she smells kind of familiar, but brush it off, maybe it's the perfume everyone uses. We drift into a side room with fewer people. She sits on the arm of a chair, I stand nearby. We're talking about relationships and she asks, "So, are you single?" I pause for maybe half a second too long. That was my chance. That was my out. But I say, kinda seeing someone, but it's not super serious. That's a lie. Emily and I are very serious. I don't even know why I said it. Maybe it was the drinks. Maybe I'm just an idiot. Probably both. Raven raises an eyebrow. Interesting, she says. Then she asks me a question that throws me completely off guard. What's your girlfriend like? I sort of stammer, trying to downplay it. She's cool. Pretty. Smart. Sometimes too smart. I laugh awkwardly. Not into parties like this though. At that, Raven just stares at me. The vibe changes. She goes quiet for a beat, then says, "That's funny." Because I'm pretty sure she told me she loved masquerade parties. The world stops for a moment. My stomach sinks. My brain starts racing, flipping through every little detail, the voice, the perfume, the posture, the attitude. And like a lightning bolt to the spine, it hits me. It's Emily. It's Emily in the red dress and the black lace mask. I don't even say anything at first. I just kind of make this dying goldfish face. She watches me with this mix of triumph and utter disappointment. "You didn't recognize me," she says. "Even after talking for 30 minutes? I try to salvage it. I really do. Wait, I thought you were someone else. I didn't, the lighting's bad." She holds up a finger. "Stop. Just stop. So you're kinda seeing someone?" I swear I've never felt that small in my life. She gets up, smooths her dress, and walks out without saying another word. I stand there like a statue for a full minute before I follow her, but she's already gone. I find Lily, the host, who says Emily left and didn't want to talk. I try calling, texting, everything. No reply. Later that night I get a single text from her that says, "Let's take a break." Now I'm in this weird purgatory. She hasn't blocked me, but she's not replying either. I've apologized in every way I can think of. Sent her flowers. Wrote her a long message explaining how I'm just a blind moron and didn't mean any of it. But here's the kicker. Later I found out from Lily that Emily planned the whole thing. She wanted to see if I'd recognize her, or at least not flirt with a random woman when I was supposedly in a relationship. She figured I'd joke around a bit, but not actually try to hook up. Instead, I managed to fail a loyalty test I didn't even know I was taking, and I failed spectacularly. Everyone in her friend group knows now. I'm the guy who didn't recognize his own girlfriend and tried to cheat on her. One of her friends literally messaged me RIP and nothing else. Another changed my contact name in a group chat to Romeo the Red Flag. So yeah. I may have destroyed the best relationship I've ever had because I couldn't recognize my girlfriend in a mask, and I let my dumb caveman instincts take over. I miss her. And every time I close my eyes, I see that black lace mask and the disappointment behind it. TIFU by thinking I could impress my girlfriend's dad by being handy, so this happened a few weeks ago, and I've finally stopped cringing long enough to share it. For context, I, 27M, have been dating my girlfriend Emily, 26F, for about a year and a half. Things are going really well, and a few months back, I met her parents for the first time. Her mom is sweet, talkative, a bit nosy in the way that's kind of charming. Her dad is different. Quiet, always watching, kind of intimidating. Think Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, but with a buzz cut and a love for Milwaukee power tools. Her dad, Tom, owns a small contracting business. Builds decks, installs cabinets, all that. Guy practically lives in flannel and steel-toed boots. I'm a software engineer. I can debug code like nobody's business, but if you hand me a drill I'll probably mistake it for a weird electric toothbrush. So naturally, I feel like a betta fish in a tank full of hammerhead sharks around him. Anyway, Emily invited me to her parents' house for her mom's birthday dinner. We arrive, and everyone's in a great mood. I'm wearing a button-down shirt I didn't spill coffee on, I brought flowers, I even remembered her mom's favorite wine. Killing it so far. Then, during dinner, the topic shifts to home renovations. Tom casually mentions that the sink in their guest bathroom has been dripping and he hasn't had time to fix it. I see this as an opportunity. I say something like, "Oh, that's a pretty easy fix, right? I could take a look after dinner." Emily gives me the "don't be a hero" look. Her mom claps her hands, delighted. Tom just raises an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Absolutely," I say, puffing my chest slightly. "I've fixed a few things in my own apartment." A lie. I once changed a shower head. It took me 3 hours. So after dessert, Tom leads me to the guest bathroom and shows me the sink. Sure enough, slow drip from the faucet. I crouch down, take a look at the pipes. Try to appear confident. Tom hands me a wrench and then steps back, arms folded, silently watching like he's judging a cooking competition where the contestants are toddlers with knives. I tighten a few things under the sink. It's awkward, cramped, I bang my elbow twice. But the drip seems to stop. I stand up, proud. Looks like that did it. Tom leans in, inspects the faucet. Huh. Not bad, he says, like I just earned a merit badge in not screwing up. I'm riding high. We go back to the living room, and I bask in the glow of Emily's impressed smile. That's when the screaming starts. Her mom shrieks from the kitchen. We all rush in, and I swear to God, it's like a scene from Titanic. Water is pouring from the ceiling light fixture. Like pouring, a steady stream splashing onto the floor. Her mom is standing there in shock, holding a birthday cake, dripping wet like she just ran through a car wash. Everyone looks at me. What the hell did you do? Tom asks, and his voice is so calm it's scarier than yelling. I have no idea what I did. I run back to the bathroom and open the vanity. Water is gushing from the pipes, spraying the inside of the cabinet like a busted fire hydrant. In my genius attempt to tighten the fixtures, I apparently cracked one of the plastic pipe joints, and it finally gave out like 5 minutes later. Tom comes in, muttering curses, and shuts off the water main in the basement. Emily is behind him, staring at me with a mixture of disbelief and secondhand embarrassment. I try to help clean up, but Tom waves me off and calls in one of his guys from work. The guy shows up with a tool bag and a shop vac, and in 10 minutes he's got it under control while I stand there like an idiot holding a towel. Her mom's birthday cake is ruined. The dining room ceiling is ruined. My dignity is absolutely ruined. To make matters worse, as Tom's guy is cleaning up, he says, "This pipe joint looks like it was over-tightened." Real rookie move. Tom nods slowly. Doesn't say anything, just claps me on the shoulder in a way that somehow says both you tried and don't ever touch plumbing again. Emily didn't talk to me the whole ride home. Later, she admitted it was kind of funny in retrospect, but she made me promise never to fix anything at her parents' house ever again. Moral of the story, if you're dating someone whose dad is basically a human Home Depot, don't try to impress him by pretending to be a handyman. He's seen real disasters. You don't need to become one. TIFU. By accidentally convincing my girlfriend I was secretly living a double life with a second family. This happened a few weeks ago, but I'm still dealing with the aftermath. I, who 29M, have been dating my girlfriend Sarah, 28F, for about 2 years. We live separately but spend a lot of time at each other's places, and we've talked about moving in together by the end of the year. Things have been going great. Or so I thought. Now, I work in IT and occasionally get called out to client sites, which can be an hour or more away. I hate commuting, so I've been using a friend's empty house when I get called to one specific area that's a 90-minute drive from my apartment. This friend, Tom, is a pilot who's almost never home and offered me the place to crash whenever I needed. He's a good friend and I've known him since college. The house is modest but comfy, with 2 bedrooms and a little garden. I use the guest room and try not to touch anything. One day, Sarah got called into a weekend conference near that area and asked if I wanted to come along and make it a little getaway. I had plans to visit Tom's house for a work call the same weekend, so I figured we'd just meet up there. I didn't tell her about Tom's house yet, figured I'd surprise her with the fact that I had a peaceful place to stay, maybe even make it sound like a romantic, spontaneous weekend. So Friday comes, I head to Tom's house early, do my job, and wait for Sarah. She gets there late in the afternoon, and I meet her at the door. But as soon as she walks in, she goes quiet. Now, you have to understand something. Tom is divorced and has 2 kids. He gets them every other weekend, and they stay in the house's second bedroom. The room is full of toys, posters, and even a hand-painted sign on the door that says Max and Bella's room. There are framed photos of them in the hallway, family portraits, drawings stuck to the fridge with magnets, and a whole pile of board games stacked in the living room corner. Sarah looks around slowly, taking it all in, and I see the look in her eyes change from excitement to something else, confusion, maybe even suspicion. I try to explain. This isn't my place. It's my friend Tom's. I crash here when I have to work nearby. She doesn't say much. Just nods slowly, walks through the house, picks up a couple of the kid drawings and looks at the signatures. Bella, she reads out loud. Cute name. At this point I'm realizing I've messed up somehow, but I don't quite know how bad it is yet. I keep trying to talk, telling her about Tom, how he's away all the time, how generous he's been letting me use the place. But I can tell she's not really buying it. She keeps her smile on, but it's tight. The rest of the weekend is weird. She's distant, doesn't want to go out, just keeps asking vague questions. Have you ever wanted kids? Do you think you'd ever tell someone if you already had a family? Would you ever lie to protect someone? On Sunday, she says she's got a headache and leaves early. I feel like something's off, but don't press her. Monday morning, I wake up to a barrage of texts. Long, emotional texts. She's accusing me of having a secret second family. Apparently, she dug through some of my stuff while I was in the shower that weekend, found an envelope in my bag with an old photo of me holding a baby. That baby is my niece, but I never told her about the photo, and I guess in the context of everything else, it looked damning. Then she went full detective. She searched Tom's house while I was asleep. Found some birthday cards addressed to Dad, and a couple letters from his ex-wife. She's convinced that I live a second life here, with a wife and kids, and that Tom is just a cover. She even Googled the address and found public records showing the house is owned by Thomas J. Reynolds. She didn't recognize the name and assumed it was fake. My name is Josh Reynolds. She thought I had bought the house under a different name and used Josh as my alias. We're talking full conspiracy-level thinking here. I try to explain. I send her Tom's LinkedIn, his pilot license, pictures of us in college, old Facebook albums. I call Tom and put him on speaker, and he's laughing his ass off, but Sarah doesn't find it funny. She thinks he's in on it. I even FaceTime Tom's kids and ask them to say hi to Sarah and explain that I'm Uncle Josh. They're confused, but they do it. Max even says, "We like it when Josh comes over because he brings candy and doesn't yell when we jump on the couch." This seems to help a little, but she's still not convinced. She thinks the whole thing is too convenient. "Why didn't you ever tell me about this place?" she asks. And I get it. In hindsight, yeah, it's super weird that I never mentioned I crash at another man's house sometimes. But in my head, it just wasn't relevant. We take a break. She says she needs time to think. I spend the next week spiraling, wondering how I went from great boyfriend to possible secret family man in one weekend. I talk to friends, coworkers, even my mom, who bursts out laughing so hard she chokes on her tea. Eventually, Sarah agrees to meet. We sit down, I walk her through everything again, Tom's divorce, the kids, the photo of my niece, the old envelope. I show her the text messages Tom and I have exchanged over the years, some of which are just memes and long rants about airline food. I let her read them all. After an hour of this, she finally laughs. A real laugh. "I still don't fully get why you didn't just say something," she says. But okay. Maybe I went too far. We're okay now. But it's not quite the same. There's still this lingering awkwardness, like she's not 100% sure I don't have another life tucked away somewhere. I catch her glancing at my phone sometimes, and once she asked me out of nowhere what my niece's birthday was, like she was testing me. Moral of the story? If you're borrowing your buddy's kid-filled house to crash in while working out of town, tell your girlfriend, or she might think you're secretly living a life straight out of a soap opera. TIFU by accidentally live streaming my nervous breakdown to my entire company during a virtual town hall. This happened last Friday and I haven't been able to sleep properly since. For context, I work at a mid-sized tech company, around 400 employees, all remote. Once a month, we have these all-hands town hall meetings on Zoom. Usually, they're hosted by our CEO and a few department heads, and the rest of us just attend with cameras and mics off unless called on. Now, I'm a back-end engineer. Not someone who's ever in the spotlight. I keep my head down, write code, and cringe at the idea of public speaking. I've only ever been spotlighted once during a meeting, and that was a year ago to demo a new tool I built. My camera's usually covered with a post-it, and I rarely speak. Perfect existence. But for the past few months, I've been under immense stress. My team lost 2 engineers to layoffs, and their workload landed squarely on my shoulders. My manager is nice but passive, and leadership has no clue we're drowning. I'd been surviving on caffeine, passive-aggressive Slack messages, and a slowly crumbling mental state. Friday's town hall was supposed to be routine. I logged in 10 minutes early, as usual, with my mic muted and camera off. But here's the thing. I had been using Zoom earlier that day for a one-on-one with my therapist. We'd been doing EMDR therapy to help me cope with burnout, and part of it involved me talking aloud through some seriously personal internal monologue, frustrations, insecurities, breakdown-level stuff. And in that session, I had to turn my camera and mic on. Fast forward to the town hall. I joined, but apparently, I didn't close the therapy session properly. My Zoom mic was still live. And because I had become so used to talking through my thoughts during therapy, I kept doing it. Out loud. I was pacing around my apartment, completely unaware that I was speaking into the all-hands meeting like a madman, thinking I was alone. What did I say? A lot. Things like, I swear to God, if Carol sends me one more condescending Jira comment I'm going to snap. Or, why the F ********* did I even take this job? I should have listened to my gut and gone into forestry. Or, does no one realize I'm the only person maintaining the entire back-end pipeline? Do they all think it just works by magic? I also gave a dramatic reading of the Slack message I wanted to send to my manager but didn't. Hey Chris, love being crushed by unrealistic deadlines. Maybe next sprint you can add a Jira for watch my sanity disintegrate. I wish that's where it ended, but no. At some point, I did an entire fake conversation where I pretended to be our CEO thanking me for saving the company. In a mocking voice, I said, "Oh wow, thank you for carrying the whole back end on your back like Sisyphus. Here's a Starbucks gift card for your efforts." This went on for about 7 minutes. 7 minutes. I only realized something was wrong when I glanced at my screen to check the time and saw my face, live, big, in the Zoom spotlight. Not just in a corner box. Full screen. Meaning someone, probably the host, had spotlighted me to get my attention. Panic took over. I froze, stared at the camera like a deer in headlights, and in pure desperation, slammed my laptop shut so hard I'm shocked it didn't crack. My phone immediately lit up with Slack messages. Some were from coworkers I liked. "Dude, are you okay?" You went full Joker mode. Others were less friendly. That was wildly inappropriate. People from HR were on that call. Then came the email from HR asking to chat briefly on Monday. The weekend was a black hole of shame. I contemplated faking my death. I Googled how to move to Mongolia with no money. I barely slept. On Monday morning, I sat in my kitchen, dressed for my virtual execution, staring into the abyss of my webcam. Surprisingly, HR wasn't as furious as I expected. The woman I spoke with, Janine, actually sounded sympathetic. She said, "That was a lot. But it's clear you're under a lot of stress. We've had conversations about workloads in engineering already, and this incident, while not ideal, has added to the urgency." I didn't get fired. I didn't even get formally reprimanded. Instead, they put me on a mandatory 2-week mental health leave. Paid. They also promised to reevaluate staffing on my team. That part sounds like a win, right? Except I still have to come back eventually. To a team full of people who heard me say if Carol's passive-aggressive exclamation points were a person, I'd fight them in a Chili's parking lot. And Carol, of course, heard that too. She hasn't responded to my apology DM. So now I'm in limbo, trying to figure out how to show my face again without spontaneously combusting. My girlfriend, ever the optimist, keeps telling me that at least I'd shook up the corporate dystopia and that maybe, just maybe, someone else on that call heard what I said and thought, yeah, me too. But all I can think about is the Starbucks line. I really did say that out loud. In front of 400 people. Including the actual CEO. Hey, friends. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by accidentally giving my entire office the impression that I have a poop fetish. So, this happened last week, and I'm only just now recovering from the second-hand embarrassment. For context, I, 32M, work in a mid-size corporate office, fairly relaxed environment, about 60 of us on my floor. I work in marketing. Our department is tight-knit, but we're also kind of the pranksters of the company. Fake Slack messages, passive-aggressive mug labels, random stuff taped under desks, that kind of harmless chaos. It started innocently. I was at lunch with a few coworkers, and someone brought up weird Amazon product reviews. You know, the absurd ones where people write 3,000 words reviewing a banana slicer. I remembered this one infamous review thread about Haribo sugar-free gummy bears that make you explode in the bathroom. So I'm like, oh my god, you guys have to read the Haribo reviews. Funniest ******* I've ever read. They hadn't heard of it, so I promised to send the link. That evening, I found the post on Amazon, skimmed through a few reviews, still laughing, and emailed it to our office thread titled, "Do not read this at your desk unless you want to cry laughing." It was received well. People were crying laughing, exactly as predicted. It made the rounds fast. Even our VP chimed in with, "I haven't laughed this hard since Steve's standing desk collapsed mid-Zoom." All good fun. Here's where the derailment began. That same night, one of my coworkers, I'll call her Jenny, replied all with a YouTube video someone had made, narrating the reviews dramatically. I clicked it, and autoplay must have been on, because after that video, another started playing, a YouTube video titled something like Top 10 Grossest Foods That'll Make You Puke. I didn't notice. I was doing dishes in the background, and my laptop kept playing video after video in that algorithm rabbit hole. The next day, during a quiet moment between meetings, I opened my laptop to queue up a presentation. But when I connected it to the big screen in our shared conference room, it automatically opened YouTube to the last video I'd watched. Let me describe what 23 coworkers, including our department head and the intern I'm supposed to be mentoring, saw projected in 4K, a paused video titled Poop Transformation, the Science of Fecal Transplants, with a thumbnail image of someone holding a brown sludge in a petri dish with a big OL grin. And the cherry on top, auto captions had started, and the words "What does human poop taste like?" were frozen on the bottom of the screen. There was silence. Everyone froze. Our department head, Laura, blinked very slowly and said, is this part of the pitch?" In a moment of sheer panic, I tried to Alt-Tab to the presentation, but my hands were shaking and I accidentally hit full screen. So now this giant poop video was front and center, captioned, loud, and starting to play with sound. Most people don't realize how valuable feces can be. I finally unplugged the HDMI cord, and it went black. I looked around. Half the room looked confused. The other half looked like they were deciding whether or not to laugh. My intern, bless her, whispered, "Do you want me to? Google slides it for you." I mumbled something like, "Sorry, that was a work-related thing." Health marketing. Gut health campaign. 4 probiotics. None of which was remotely true. We got through the meeting. Nobody brought it up. But the vibe had shifted. People were side-eyeing me. Jenny wouldn't make eye contact. Even Laura looked hesitant to shake my hand after. It got worse. Later that afternoon, someone, I still don't know who, printed out a still from the video and taped it to the fridge in the break room. Captioned, "Marcus's lunch inspiration." The fridge had a sticky note that said, "Poop smoothies, new office trend?" Then the Slack jokes started. Every time I posted something, someone would respond with the poop emoji. At first it was kind of funny. Then someone sent me a calendar invite titled "Brown Brand Brainstorm." The agenda literally said, "Fecal forward marketing opportunities." I tried to brush it off, but I could tell it wasn't going away. At one point, I opened a spreadsheet during a team call and realized someone had renamed the tabs to things like duty analysis and Q3 projected growth. The intern asked me, "Dead serious, are fecal transplants actually profitable? Or was that just for personal interest?" I had to excuse myself to go scream in the stairwell. Then HR called. They had received a report about an inappropriate video shown during a work meeting. I explained the situation: algorithm, autoplay, not intentional, gut health, and the HR rep actually chuckled, thankfully. But she still had to formally advise me to be mindful of projecting non-work content, and suggested I complete a digital learning module on professional media sharing in the workplace. Which, of course, is now the final nail in the poop coffin, because that fact somehow made it back to the team. Now my Slack status says, "In training, media sharing for professionals," and every time I walk by someone's desk, I feel like they're holding in laughter. I overheard someone say, "Ask Marcus, he's our chief duty officer now." All because I wanted to share some dumb candy reviews. Moral of the story, always clear your browser tabs. And maybe don't become the guy associated with poop, some reputations stick harder than you'd think. TIFU by trying to impress my girlfriend's dad with my survival skills and nearly setting his house on fire. So this happened a few months ago, and I'm only just now able to talk about it without feeling the intense need to flee to another country. My girlfriend, Emma, and I had been dating for about a year when she invited me to spend the weekend at her parents' lake house in Vermont. Her family is into the outdoorsy lifestyle, hiking, fishing, chopping wood for fun, that sort of thing. I'm more of a weekend Warzone and DoorDash kind of guy, but I figured this was my chance to bond with her dad, Ron, who is basically if Ron Swanson and Bear Grylls had a baby. She warned me he could be a little intense, but I didn't want to seem like I couldn't hold my own. I should have just nodded politely and kept my mouth shut. We arrived Friday evening, and her parents were really nice. Her mom made this incredible venison stew and her dad poured me a neat glass of bourbon like he was testing whether I'd flinch. I didn't, barely, and we got to talking. He asked if I liked the outdoors, and I said something along the lines of, "I love nature. I go camping all the time." This was a lie. I once went camping in high school and spent the night curled in my car because I couldn't figure out the tent. Then I made the biggest mistake. I told him I had some survival skills. He perked up immediately. "Oh yeah? Like what?" So I, in my infinite wisdom and Google wisdom level knowledge, rattled off a few things I'd picked up from YouTube: building a fire without matches, purifying water with charcoal, basic shelter building. I was regurgitating bits of a guy named Primitive Dave or something. His eyes lit up. "Well, maybe we'll test some of that tomorrow." Oh. Oh no. The next morning, he wakes me up at 6:15 sharp, no alarm, just the sound of a man chopping wood outside like it's a religious ritual. He hands me an axe and says, "Warm up with this." I want to cry, but I chop some logs, badly, trying to look cool. He watches for a few minutes, nods, and says, "All right, I've got something fun planned." He takes me out into the woods behind the house with a tarp, a knife, some rope, and a flint striker. Let's say you're stuck out here for the night. Show me how you'd set up shelter and start a fire. I panic, but I pretend like I know what I'm doing. I rig up a very sad-looking lean-to with the tarp and some sticks. It kind of looked like a tarp sneezed and collapsed on itself. Then comes the fire. I scrape the flint against a rock for way too long before giving up and using some birch bark, dry pine needles, and a bird's nest of twigs. Nothing. I finally get a tiny ember and blow on it too hard, sending it flying into my lap. Ron is watching me the whole time, arms crossed, face unreadable. Eventually, I manage to get a pitiful fire going. He nods once and says, "Not bad. You're green, but you've got some grit." I'm feeling great. I survived the Ron test. But no, dear reader. That was only the warm-up. Later that evening, I decide to really cement my status. Emma and her mom go into town to get wine for dinner. Ron is outside, fiddling with a busted chainsaw. I'm left alone inside. I remember a trick I saw on YouTube where you can light a fire using steel wool and a 9V battery. It looks cool and kind of badass. And what do I see sitting on their kitchen counter? Steel wool next to the sink. A 9V battery on the windowsill. It's fate. I think, this is it. This is my Ron moment, I go outside, tell Ron I've got a trick to show him, and grab the materials. He raises an eyebrow but follows me back in. I place the steel wool in the fireplace, good, surround it with some paper towels as kindling, questionable, and touch the battery to it. A spark appears. The wool catches. I blow gently. It flares up fast, too fast. Turns out, steel wool burns hot. And fast. It ignites the paper towels instantly, which shoot up like a fireball. I panic and blow on it. Why do I always blow on things, which just sends embers flying out of the fireplace onto the rug? The rug. The beautiful, apparently flammable wool rug. Ron yells, "Jesus Christ," and grabs the fireplace shovel, while I start stomping the sparks like I'm playing whack-a-mole with the floor. One ember smolders long enough to create a black, baseball-sized scorch mark before we fully douse it with water from a flower vase. We're both standing there, soaked, smelling like burnt hair and singed cotton. Ron just stares at me, the 9V battery still in my hand like the murder weapon. Then he says, "Why didn't you just use the damn firewood like a normal person?" I have no answer. Emma and her mom returned 15 minutes later to the smell of smoke and me scrubbing the rug with baking soda. Ron tells them I tried to cook dinner in the fireplace, and walks out to the deck to drink in silence. Dinner is awkward. Emma's mom is trying to be polite, Emma is staring at the black spot on the rug, and Ron is drinking like a man who's watched his taxes go up in real time. The worst part? The next morning, I tried to make amends by offering to fix the rug. Ron says, "You want to prove yourself? Go dig a compost trench behind the shed." I spent 3 hours digging a hole in the woods like a punished dog while Ron whittled a spoon and watched. We eventually left Sunday night. Emma was sweet about it, but when we got in the car she said, "Maybe just don't try to show off next time." I nodded and agreed. And then she added, "My dad gave you a nickname." I ask what it is. She sighs. Firestarter. I've been to 2 more family dinners since. The rug is gone. The nickname remains. TIFU by accidentally turning my girlfriend's dad into a local legend named the Screamer, so this happened about 2 months ago, but the aftermath still haunts me and probably will until I move to another state. My girlfriend, let's call her Sarah, and I have been dating for about a year. Things were going well, and she decided it was time for me to meet her parents. They live in a small town about 2 hours from where we live, and I was genuinely excited. She spoke very highly of them. Her mom is a retired elementary school teacher and her dad is a quiet, blue-collar guy who restores vintage motorcycles in his spare time. He also doesn't talk much, which, as an overtalker myself, made me feel both challenged and nervous. We drove up on a Friday night. Her parents welcomed us with that small-town warmth and awkwardness I half expected. Her dad, let's call him Ron, shook my hand, nodded silently, and spent most of the evening sipping a beer in the living room while Sarah and her mom caught up in the kitchen. Now here's where the screw-up begins to take shape. I should mention that I'm a pretty heavy sleeper. I have earplugs, a white noise machine, and sometimes melatonin, depending on how wired I am. But I also have this weird nighttime habit, I talk in my sleep. Not every night, but often enough that it's made for some awkward moments in past relationships. Sarah finds it funny, though I sometimes shout weird nonsense that apparently sounds like demonic Latin. I've recorded myself a few times and yeah, I get why it freaks people out. So we go to bed in the guest room that night. I do my usual pre-bed routine, earplugs in, white noise on, Sarah reading next to me. Lights out. Around 3 a.m., I bolt upright. I don't remember doing this. I only know because Sarah later told me. According to her, and corroborated by Ron's terrified memory, I began screaming. Not just yelling. Full-throated, blood-curdling screaming. Like a horror movie extra about to get gutted. And then I started speaking, again, not conscious, something that sounded like a mix between guttural German and the death rattle of a bear. This apparently went on for several minutes. Long enough that Ron, who sleeps light because of tinnitus, woke up, thought someone was being murdered in the house, and sprinted into the hallway armed with an aluminum baseball bat. Sarah said she was trying to wake me up, but I kept pushing her away and repeating the phrase "the hole opens" over and over. Still asleep. Ron, hearing that, came pounding on the door, yelling, "Is everything okay?" And I apparently yelled back, in a voice she said didn't sound like me, "The hounds know your name, Ron." He dropped the bat. I kept screaming. Ron apparently ran down the hall and out of the house into the backyard in nothing but boxers and socks. Sarah's mom came out, panicked. Sarah finally managed to shake me awake and I sat up, totally calm, and said, "Why is everyone yelling?" I had zero memory of any of it. Sarah explained, and I immediately felt this creeping, cold shame unlike anything I've felt since the time I peed myself during a spelling bee in 4th grade. We all reconvened in the kitchen around 4 a.m. Ron wouldn't look me in the eye. He had a glass of scotch in his hand and was visibly shaking. I apologized over and over, explained my sleep talking, but honestly there's no rational explanation that makes "the hounds know your name" sound okay. Sarah's mom was nice about it, though clearly rattled. "Well," she said, trying to break the ice, "at least we know your imagination works." Ron just muttered, "You said my name." In that voice. We left that Sunday after an awkward breakfast and a whole lot of silence. Now, here's where it gets worse. Sarah went back for her mom's birthday a couple weeks later and texted me the next morning saying, "I can't believe this, you started a thing." Apparently, Ron told one of his buddies about the possession night. Not everything, just that he heard terrifying noises and a weird phrase during the night and someone screamed his name. His buddy told someone else. And now the story's taken on a life of its own. The local Facebook group has a post titled "Is the Screamer Back?" With over 100 comments. Some people swear they heard weird noises that same night. A guy even wrote that he saw red eyes in the woods. Someone else claims it's the ghost of a Civil War soldier who haunts the neighborhood and only shows himself to those close to death. People are legitimately invested in this. Someone even started selling little "The Screamer" stickers at the gas station. Ron, meanwhile, has become a minor local celebrity. People stop him at the grocery store and ask about it. He doesn't say much, but his wife told Sarah that he's secretly leaning into it. He installed a motion-activated floodlight in the backyard and sometimes just walks outside and stares into the trees with a flashlight, knowing his neighbors watch him. Someone caught it on camera and posted it with a caption, "He walks among us." Asterisk it has 6,000 views on TikTok. He even bought a patch for his motorcycle jacket that says the hounds know. He still doesn't really talk to me. Sarah finds the whole thing hilarious and insists I didn't ruin anything, but I can't help feeling like I emotionally scarred a man into becoming a cryptid. Every time I see a new meme or Facebook post about the screamer, my stomach knots. I accidentally launched a folklore. To top it all off, Sarah said Ron is thinking about writing a short story about it. She saw a notebook on his workbench with "The Night of the Screamer" written on the cover. I want to apologize again, but I don't know what else to say. The damage is done. I've become the source material for a small-town myth. People whisper about me at diners. They think I'm an omen. I now live in fear that someone will recognize me at the farmer's market and whisper, "That's the guy who screamed the prophecy." I just wanted to impress her parents. TIFU by accidentally starting a neighborhood-wide war over a garden gnome. This happened a few weeks ago, but the fallout is still very real. I live in a relatively quiet suburban neighborhood. It's one of those planned communities with HOA rules like no pink flamingos, no loud music past 9 p.m., and God forbid you let your grass get too long or Nancy from across the street will send a polite but passive-aggressive letter reminding you of the community standards. So yeah, a very step-forward kind of vibe. Anyway, it all started when I bought a gnome. Not just any gnome. This was a monstrous, 3-foot-tall abomination with glowing red LED eyes and a cheeky grin that made it look like it knew where the bodies were buried. It was made of resin and weighed a ton. I named him Greg. Greg was a joke gift from my coworker after I told her about my HOA's obsession with lawn decor regulations. It was meant to be a gag, a quick photo op, maybe leave it up for a day or two before I put it away. I didn't account for the fact that I left Greg outside overnight. The next morning, I found a typed letter duct taped to Greg's head. It was from the HOA president, warning me that satanic or disturbing imagery has no place in our community and that further violations will result in fines. I laughed, snapped a pic, and posted it to my tiny Instagram page with the caption, "Greg has angered the suburban gods." Here's where it starts to spiral. My post got shared by someone local with a bigger following. Then it hit a neighborhood Facebook group I didn't even know existed. Suddenly there were hundreds of comments. Half the people thought Greg was hilarious and wanted to know where they could get one. The other half were horrified that this filth was being tolerated in our pristine streets. Within 3 days, Greg became a symbol. Team Greg supporters started putting little mini gnomes on their lawns in solidarity. At first it was just my next-door neighbor Jeff, who has a good sense of humor. Then the couple across the street added a solar-powered gnome holding a tiki torch. Someone else made a flag with Greg's face and mounted it on their garage like he was some kind of patron saint of sarcasm. The HOA was not pleased. We all got formal warning letters. I was fined $75. Jeff got one too, even though his gnome was like 6 inches tall and frankly adorable. Now, I should have just taken Greg down and ended it. But no. I doubled down. I gave Greg a tiny throne made from cinder blocks and surrounded him with solar lights so he'd glow like a demonic garden Buddha at night. That's when the anonymous threats started. Someone dumped a bag of mulch on my driveway. Another person left a small crucifix on my mailbox with a note that said, "Cleanse your home of the gnome." I thought it was hilarious, but my wife was getting fed up. She told me to just take it down and be done with it. I didn't listen. Things escalated fast. One night, Greg was kidnapped. I came out the next morning and he was gone, throne and all. No note, no signs of struggle. Just a patch of flattened grass and one of his glowing red eyes left behind, still blinking. I posted a wanted, missing gnome flyer on the neighborhood bulletin board with a $50 reward. More people rallied behind Team Greg. A few started painting gnomes with tiny protest signs, "Bring Greg home" and "Gnome Lives Matter." That same week, the HOA called an emergency meeting. I attended, naturally. It was standing room only. People were genuinely pissed off, not just about the gnome, but about the overreach of the HOA in general. Greg had become a symbol of freedom, or resistance, or whatever suburban rebellion looks like in 2025. The HOA president, a woman named Marlene who dresses like she's always about to attend a funeral, tried to maintain order but was quickly drowned out by arguments. The meeting devolved into chaos. Someone accused someone else of stealing Greg. Someone else stood up and shouted that Marlene had installed a security camera that pointed at their backyard. People were yelling about tree height restrictions, about lawn colors, about barking dogs and street parking. Greg had unearthed all the suppressed rage hiding beneath the fake smiles and manicured hedges. Eventually, police were called, not because of violence, but because someone triggered the fire alarm on the way out. That part is still a mystery. The next day, Greg returned. He was sitting peacefully on my front porch, throne and all. Only now, he had a new addition, a tiny duct-taped sword in one hand and a helmet made from what looked like a cut-up soda can. Someone had turned him into a warrior. A gnome knight. There was no note, no explanation. I put him back on the lawn. The HOA didn't find me again, probably because they were still reeling from the meeting debacle. But they did send out a new flyer banning all lawn decor with anthropomorphic features larger than 12 inches in height. It didn't mention Greg by name, but we all knew. Now here's the kicker. A week later, a local news crew showed up. Someone had tipped them off about the gnome war of suburbia. They interviewed me, Jeff, even Marlene, who looked like she wanted to evaporate on the spot. The story aired on a slow news night and, somehow, went viral. People all over the country started posting pictures of their own Gregs. Amazon sold out of the exact model I had. Someone even made a knockoff version called Rebel Gnome. The neighborhood is divided. Some people still won't talk to me. Others give me a secret thumbs up when they walk by. Jeff made a limited run of Team Greg bumper stickers and donated the proceeds to a local animal shelter. My wife still rolls her eyes but has started referring to Greg as his royal gnominess. I still don't know who took him or who returned him, but Greg stands strong in the yard, glowing every night, guarding our house like some kind of cursed suburban talisman. And that's how I accidentally ignited a civil war with a garden gnome. TIFU by trying to impress my crush with my cooking skills and nearly burning down my apartment. I'd like to think of myself as a relatively competent cook. Sure, I'm no professional chef, but I've made enough meals to know my way around a kitchen. I've got the basics down, pasta, stir-fries, the occasional chicken roast, but one thing I've never really done is cook for someone else. That all changed when I met Jenna, a girl I'd been seeing casually for a few weeks. Jenna is the type of person who makes everything seem effortless. She's got this natural charm, the kind that makes you feel like you've known her for years even if it's only been a couple of weeks. We'd been on a few dates, nothing too fancy, just grabbing coffee or walking around the park, but we hadn't really spent a ton of time in each other's personal space. That is, until I got this idea. I wanted to do something special for Jenna. I knew she liked cooking, which, let me tell you, was already a red flag, so I thought, hey, why not cook for her? I'll make her dinner, show off my skills, and hopefully impress her. Simple, right? I didn't exactly know what she liked to eat, but I figured I could play it safe and go with pasta. It's easy, comforting, and you can make it look fancy if you add a nice sauce and maybe some garlic bread. I had the whole thing planned out in my head. A nice, cozy dinner at my apartment, followed by a movie. Perfect. I went to the store to buy all the ingredients: spaghetti, garlic, olive oil, Parmesan cheese, fresh basil, and a few tomatoes. I was feeling pretty good about it, like, yeah, I've totally got this. I picked up some fancy wine because, of course, you need wine with pasta. Not that I know much about wine, but I thought the bottle with the most ornate label looked like something Jenna would appreciate. I even grabbed a dessert, chocolate mousse, because, you know, I wanted to have everything covered. When Jenna arrived at my apartment, she looked amazing as usual. I greeted her with a glass of wine, and she complimented my place, which was a bit of a mess, but I had cleaned up enough to make it look presentable. We sat down in the living room and chatted for a bit, and I could feel the butterflies in my stomach. Everything was going according to plan. The moment had arrived. I told her that dinner would be ready soon, and I headed into the kitchen to start cooking. I turned on the stove, grabbed my pot for boiling pasta, and began to heat up the olive oil for the sauce. Everything seemed fine, at first. But this is where things started to go downhill. First, I may have overestimated my skill with cooking pasta. I'd read somewhere that you should salt the water generously, but I think I took the generously part a little too seriously. I poured in a ridiculous amount of salt, like, probably 2 tablespoons for 1 pot of water. Of course, I didn't realize this until after the pasta had already boiled. The noodles came out looking a little, well, too salty, but I thought I could salvage it with the sauce. I mean, how bad could it be? Next, I started making the sauce. Simple, right? Garlic, tomatoes, basil, olive oil, nothing too crazy. But I think I was too focused on looking like I knew what I was doing, so I cranked up the heat to cook everything faster. Big mistake. As the garlic started to brown a little too quickly, I realized I was way too late on turning it down. The whole kitchen filled with the smell of burning garlic. At this point, I was already sweating bullets, and my heart rate had gone from relaxed to full-on anxiety mode. Jenna was still in the living room, laughing at something on her phone, blissfully unaware of my kitchen disaster. Meanwhile, I tried to salvage the sauce, but instead, I ended up with this overly charred mess that had the consistency of mud. There was no way this was going to work. But I couldn't back out now. I had to save face. I took the pasta, drained it, without realizing that the salty water was still clinging to the noodles, and dumped it into the sauce, praying that something would fix the situation. But, of course, it didn't. It just made the noodles even saltier. I threw together some garlic bread, hoping that might redeem the situation, but I accidentally burned it too. The bread was so crisp it could double as a weapon. By the time I set the table, I was in full panic mode, sweating and desperately hoping I could still salvage some semblance of a meal. I brought everything to the table, pasta, charred sauce, burnt garlic bread, and all, and sat down across from Jenna, who was looking at me with that "I'm curious to see how this goes" look on her face. I tried to act casual, like this was all totally fine. "So, what do you think?" I said, smiling awkwardly. Jenna took a bite of the pasta, and her face immediately changed. She didn't say anything at first, just chewed slowly, and then set her fork down. Wow. This is different. The understatement of the century. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks as I waited for her to say something else. She finally looked at me and tried to smile, but it was more of a grimace. It's just a little salty." I nodded, trying to play it cool. "Yeah, I guess I went a little heavy on the salt. But hey, at least the garlic bread is crispy." She took a small bite of the garlic bread and immediately spit it out into her napkin. "It's, really crunchy. I think it might be carbonized." At this point, I couldn't take it anymore. I laughed nervously and threw my hands up. "I think I just ruined dinner." Jenna laughed too, but I could see she was trying to be polite. "It's okay," she said, "I appreciate the effort. You tried. It's just, well, we might want to get something else for dinner." We ended up going out for pizza, and while the night wasn't a total disaster, it certainly wasn't the romantic dinner I had imagined. Jenna was incredibly sweet about the whole thing, but I could tell she was trying to hold back a laugh. It wasn't exactly the way I wanted to impress her, but at least we had a story to tell. And, honestly, I learned my lesson: never try to cook something fancy if you don't know what you're doing. In the end, I think we both agreed that the burnt garlic bread was the best part of the evening. It's become an inside joke now, but I think we'll stick to simpler dinners from now on, like ordering pizza. So, yesterday I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life. You know those days where everything just feels like it's going wrong, and you wish you could just crawl into bed and never face the world again? Well, that was my day, but instead of retreating to my bed, I decided to do the opposite, go on an epic adventure with my friends. Let's just say that, in retrospect, I should have gone to bed. It all started innocently enough. My friends and I had been talking about doing something fun for weeks, and we finally settled on going to this obscure little festival in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place that only locals know about, and you have to follow these winding roads through the forest to even get there. Of course, I didn't look up anything about the festival, I just trusted the group to know what we were doing. Big mistake. So, we pile into a car, a couple of my friends, a few drinks, because why not, right, and the GPS guiding us through what looked like a scene out of a horror movie. The kind of place where a quick Google search shows 2-star reviews and stories about how it's an acquired taste. I figured it would be fine because, well, I had a few drinks and thought everything would be hilarious. The GPS led us to this tiny, one-lane dirt road that seemed to get narrower and more desolate with every passing minute. I could feel the unease creeping in, but I didn't want to be the buzzkill, so I kept it to myself. The scenery around us was gorgeous as dense trees, the sun beginning to dip beneath the horizon, and a soft breeze carrying the scent of pine and something slightly off. But we pressed on, driving like idiots, laughing, playing music, and generally ignoring the fact that none of us had any idea where we were going. It was one of those we'll figure it out when we get there kind of moments. We finally pull up to what I assume was the festival grounds. But instead of a lively scene full of booths, lights, and people, there was just a small, slightly dilapidated building and a handful of people sitting around a fire. I thought, okay, maybe the festival's just starting. It's not a huge event. But it was already dark, and the place had a strange vibe to it. Everyone was dressed in what looked like costumes from a low-budget horror movie, grungy, patchwork clothing, face paint, and the kind of eerie smiles that seemed just a little too forced. There was a sense that I had just wandered into some sort of secret cult gathering. But, being the idiot I am, I didn't say anything. I'm here now, and I'd come this far, so why not stay? Besides, my friends were already starting to mingle with the weirdos, and I didn't want to seem out of place. Now, here's where it gets bad. We didn't really think about what we were drinking. The stuff they were offering at the bar was some local brew that tasted like a mix of cough syrup and fermented fruit. Everyone was drinking it, so I figured I might as well join in, despite it being a questionable color. But this was a festival after all, so I just rolled with it. I should have stopped after one drink. But by this point, my friends and I were all deep into conversation with the odd festival goers. It wasn't like they were hostile or anything, just strange. A few people kept staring at us in this unsettling way, like they knew something we didn't. But hey, what's a little uncomfortable small talk between friends, right? After a while, I started feeling really dizzy, and the ground beneath me seemed to shift like I was walking on a floating dock. I tried to keep my cool, but I could tell something was definitely off. I stumbled toward the edge of the campfire, trying to get some fresh air, when I overheard a conversation that caught my attention. "Are they going to be the ones for the ceremony tonight?" one of the strangers asked, his voice low but clear in the silence of the night. My heart started racing. Ceremony? What ceremony? Before I could think too much about it, I felt a strong hand on my shoulder. I turned around to find one of the locals, an older man who had the demeanor of someone who might have been in a cult for decades, smiling at me in a way that was both friendly and terrifying. "You should come join us for the ceremony. It's the highlight of the night," he said, his voice so smooth that it made me feel like I was being hypnotized. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs were already carrying me in the opposite direction, toward the center of this strange gathering. I looked back to see my friends talking to some of the other locals, unaware of what was going on. It was like they were in a trance, and I was the only one who felt like something was wrong. At this point, I was seriously starting to question my life choices. I could still see the flickering lights of the campfire behind me, but I didn't feel safe anymore. My head was spinning, my thoughts fragmented, and I had a sinking feeling that I had been drugged, or at least had consumed something that was definitely not supposed to be consumed. I decided that I needed to leave, right now. I turned to head back toward the car, but suddenly, the crowd around the fire started chanting. Not like a happy chant, but a deep, rhythmic tone that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It sounded like something straight out of a horror movie. And before I knew it, someone grabbed my arm. "Where are you going?" "The ceremony is about to begin," the man said, his grip tightening. I could feel his fingers digging into my skin. "You can't leave now." Panic set in. I yanked my arm away and started running, weaving through the strange crowd of festival-goers who didn't seem to care at all. I don't even know how I made it to the car, but I did, slamming the door shut behind me and locking it. I called my friends, but of course, they didn't answer. I sat there, waiting in the dark, feeling like I was losing my mind. Finally, after what felt like hours, my friends stumbled back to the car, laughing and acting like they had just been at the best party of their lives. "Dude, you missed it." "The ceremony was amazing," one of them shouted. "You should have stayed. You'd have loved it." I was too shaken to speak. We drove back in silence, and I'm honestly not sure if I even fully processed what happened. But I know one thing for sure: next time, I'm staying the hell away from obscure festivals and drinking anything from strangers. Moral of the story? If you're ever invited to a festival in the middle of nowhere, and it feels like something out of a horror film, just go home. Trust me. TIFU by accidentally sending a nude to my boss. So, I've been working for this company for a couple of years now. It's a small office, and while I don't exactly have a personal relationship with my boss, I've always thought we got along well. He's approachable, understanding, and, honestly, I didn't think he was the type of guy who would make a big deal out of anything. I was wrong. Very wrong. Let me start from the beginning. A few months ago, I was casually texting with my girlfriend. We had been in a long-distance relationship for about a year, and the time between visits was getting a little unbearable. You know, those late-night texting sessions where things get a little heated, and you're just trying to keep the connection alive. Well, one of those nights, we got a little carried away, and I ended up sending a rather personal picture of myself. It wasn't anything extreme, but let's just say it wasn't something I'd be showing my mom, if you know what I mean. The next morning, I wake up to the usual barrage of work-related texts and emails. As someone who always has their phone within arm's reach, for work, of course, I started responding to the emails right away. I was still groggy, barely awake, and trying to knock out a couple of quick responses before getting out of bed. I had my email app open and my work Slack channel going at the same time. I have an iPhone, so I'm one of those people who organizes my contacts by having everything neatly categorized: work contacts, family contacts, friends, etc. And, of course, my girlfriend had her own category. Yes, I know, super organized and maybe a bit obsessive, but whatever. So, I'm firing off a few emails when I get a text from my girlfriend, who had been texting me pretty relentlessly after I went to sleep. She was telling me about her day, asking about mine, and just trying to keep the conversation going since we were in different time zones. At this point, I'm still in that foggy, half-awake state, just tapping away on my phone, responding to emails, and texting her back. I was so focused on work that I didn't realize I had left my messages app open, and I had started typing a response to her about how much I missed her. I don't know if it was the lack of caffeine or just sheer stupidity, but when I went to attach a picture for her, I accidentally tapped on the wrong photo. In my groggy state, I didn't notice that I was about to send the picture I had taken the night before. I don't know what happened, but when I clicked on the image, it sent before I could stop it. The instant panic hit me when I realized that the preview bubble showed the picture I didn't mean to send. I frantically checked the recipient name to see if it was going to her. It wasn't. Instead, it was sent to my boss. And I could only imagine what he was going to see. My boss, being the well-meaning guy he is, had messaged me earlier about a work-related task that he wanted to discuss, and I must have been multitasking while responding to the other messages. This was the worst possible thing that could have happened to me. Now, let me be clear, my boss is not a cruel guy. He's not someone who would retaliate or make things awkward. At least, I didn't think he was. But still, a work-related message with a personal photo of me in, a less than appropriate state? There was no way I could explain this away. I froze. I could barely think, let alone breathe. I tried to recall the message, but iPhones don't have that feature for texts once they're sent. My fingers were shaking, and I felt like I was about to pass out. There was no going back now. My boss would have that image, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My mind raced as I thought of all the things he might say. Would he fire me? Would he be awkward in the next meeting? Would he confront me about it? I didn't know what to do. I sat there, completely paralyzed, holding my phone like it was some sort of ticking time bomb. It was at that moment I saw that he had read the message. My stomach sank. Then, to my surprise, he replied with, is this for the meeting today, or? For a brief, fleeting second, I thought that maybe he didn't realize what he'd just received. But then I reread his message and realized that he had fully seen it. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure if I should text him back right away, but there was no way I could leave it at that. I had to own up to it. I quickly typed, "Oh my God, I am so sorry. That was not meant for you. I was texting my girlfriend and made a huge mistake. I swear, I didn't mean to send you that at all." I was sweating, my palms were clammy, and my face was beet red. I hit send and immediately regretted it, but I couldn't take it back now. There was a long pause. A very long pause. I stared at the screen, watching the dots appear and disappear as he typed. Was he going to fire me? Was he going to report me? Finally, his message came through, "No worries." I figured it was a mistake. But next time, make sure you're sending your personal photos to the right people. I stared at the screen, processing what he just said. Was he making a joke? Was he actually going to let me off the hook for this massive blunder? I couldn't believe it. My boss, who I thought would be completely weirded out and awkward about the situation, actually handled it like a pro. He didn't even bring it up in person the next time we met. And, to be honest, I never mentioned it either. I don't know what I was expecting, but he totally took it in stride. Since then, things have been mostly normal between us. I still cringe every time I see him, and every time I open my phone, I double-check who I'm sending photos to. But the worst part is that I'm still not sure if he was genuinely okay with it or if he was just being kind and professional. Either way, it's a lesson I won't ever forget. So, yeah, if you ever find yourself multitasking between work and your personal life, double-check your messages before you hit send. Because trust me, sending an unintended nude to your boss is a one-way ticket to professional anxiety that you didn't sign up for. Thanks for listening to my absolute nightmare. TIFU by trying to impress my crush with a homemade dinner and nearly burning down my apartment. It started out as a simple idea. My crush, let's call her Emily, had mentioned a few weeks ago how much she loved cooking. She's one of those people who could make anything in the kitchen look effortless, and every meal she makes looks like something straight out of a food magazine. To me, cooking was just an occasional way to feed myself, but I figured this could be a good opportunity to show off and maybe even bond with her. Plus, there's always the classic romantic angle of cooking for someone you like, right? It felt like the perfect chance to get closer to her, maybe even make her think I was the one. I know, wishful thinking. After doing a little research online, I googled easy dinner recipes to impress someone and clicked on the first link. I settled on making something relatively simple but fancy sounding. I chose to make a classic pasta dish, fettuccine alfredo. Easy enough for someone with basic cooking skills, yet rich and indulgent enough to make a good impression. I figured even if I messed up the sauce, the pasta could still be decent, right? The day of the dinner, I spent most of the afternoon preparing. I went to the grocery store to grab all the necessary ingredients: fresh fettuccine, heavy cream, butter, parmesan, garlic, you name it. I felt a little awkward walking around the store, unsure of exactly how much of each item to buy, but I was determined to make this work. As I loaded my basket, I could already picture Emily's reaction when I served her the meal. "Wow, you made this," she'd say, her eyes widening. In my mind, this was already going flawlessly. Back at home, I started to get everything ready. I chopped the garlic, melted the butter in a large skillet, and began working on the sauce. Things were going well at first, and I felt like a pro. I even tossed in a little extra garlic because, well, more flavor never hurts, right? The sauce was coming together nicely, but then, disaster struck. I turned my attention to the fettuccine, which was boiling away on the stove. Somehow, I misjudged the cooking time. I was supposed to keep an eye on the pasta and check for doneness, but I got distracted by a video on my phone. When I glanced back at the pot, I realized the water had started boiling over, and the pasta was sticking together in one big, wet clump. Panicking, I grabbed the pot off the heat and tried to salvage it. In my panic, I also forgot that I had a few things going on at once, like the sauce simmering on the stove, which, by this point, was starting to bubble and sputter a bit more than I'd like. I grabbed a spoon and stirred it furiously, hoping that would somehow save the sauce. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying enough attention to the heat, and suddenly, the sauce started separating into a greasy, watery mess. The butter had broken down, and it looked more like soup than a creamy Alfredo sauce. In the heat of the moment, I did the only logical thing: I tried to add more cream. Big mistake. The sauce got even worse, now resembling some kind of weird, oily disaster. My frustration was at an all-time high, but I wasn't about to give up. I could still make it work. I turned the heat down and tried to adjust the seasoning, adding salt and pepper in the hopes that it might help salvage the situation. It didn't. At this point, the fettuccine was way overcooked, the sauce was practically inedible, and I had no backup plan. But then, an idea popped into my head. What if I just served it up anyway? Maybe Emily wouldn't care that much about the presentation. After all, it was the thought that counted, right? Sure, it wasn't looking the way I imagined, but I could still act confident and hope for the best. I quickly plated the soggy pasta, attempting to cover up the oily mess with a generous sprinkle of Parmesan cheese. I set the table, lit some candles to create the ambience, because who doesn't love a romantic vibe, and texted Emily to let her know the dinner was ready. My heart was pounding with anticipation. I knew this was either going to be a complete disaster or a funny story I'd tell later. Either way, I hoped she would at least appreciate the effort. Emily showed up right on time, and we exchanged pleasantries before she noticed the table and the candles. "Wow, this looks amazing," she said, and I immediately felt a wave of relief. Maybe this wasn't going to be as bad as I thought. I served her the plate of fettuccine and sat down across from her, nervously watching as she took her first bite. I held my breath. She chewed slowly, then stopped. Her face went blank. It's interesting," she said, her voice betraying confusion. I could tell she was trying to be polite, but her reaction was definitely not what I had hoped for. "Is this supposed to be this, runny?" I could feel my face turning red. "Yeah, it's a special technique. A really creamy sauce, you know?" Emily didn't say anything for a moment. She took another bite, then pushed her plate slightly away. "I'm not sure if I'm getting the creamy part, but," she trailed off. "I'm not sure what's going on here." I felt like the floor was going to swallow me whole. It's the Alfredo," I muttered, feeling completely defeated. She smiled sympathetically, but I could tell she was trying not to laugh. "I'm sure it's the thought that counts," she said, clearly being kind, but it was like a punch to the gut. My brain immediately began to formulate 100 excuses, but before I could say anything, Emily spoke again. I know, I could just be picky. I'm sure it's fine." We could always. I don't know / order pizza? I didn't even hesitate. Yes. Yes, that sounds like a great idea. So, we ended up ordering pizza, and it wasn't the most romantic night I had imagined. We spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and, much to my relief, Emily didn't hold my cooking disaster against me. In fact, she thought it was hilarious, and she ended up giving me a crash course in making a proper Alfredo sauce. Needless to say, my attempt to impress her didn't go as planned, but at least we ended up having a good time. I've learned my lesson, though. I'll leave the cooking to the pros next time and just focus on the conversation. Or, better yet, pizza. If there's one thing that's universally appreciated, it's pizza. In the end, it wasn't the dinner that made the night special, but the way we laughed about my culinary fail. It wasn't the story I'd dreamed of telling, but at least it's a funny one. And hey, Emily and I still keep in touch. Maybe there's still hope for me, even if I'll never be the next Gordon Ramsay. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.